Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
This Wednesday, Mrs May pulled the trigger on Article 50, the UK's formal application to leave the European Union. Now, the wrangling starts to decide the precise terms of Britain's divorce from the EU and of any future relationship between us and the other 27 countries. The UK will no longer be a member of the European single market. That's a direct consequence of the Leave side winning the referendum. But Mrs May has also ruled out so-called soft Brexit, where the UK would have access to the European Economic Area, just like Norway, Iceland, Liechtenstein. So in return for accepting freedom of movement, agreeing to play by the EU's rules and paying for the privilege. Mrs May is opting for a hard Brexit, a clean one, a real one, some would say, arguing this fits with Vote Leave's mantra of take back control and is the only way to halt freedom of movement from EU countries into the UK. But the referendum did not ask the British people if they wanted a hard or a soft Brexit. The options posed were just leave or remain in the European Union. And the Conservative Party's manifesto, on which it was elected in 2015, as well as promising the right to vote on EU membership, also made much of the advantages of the single market to the UK. Our commitment to you, it said, is to reclaim power from Brussels and safeguard British interests in the single market. We are clear about what we want from Europe, it went on. We say yes to the single market, yes to turbocharging free trade, yes to working together when we are stronger together than alone. Does Mrs May have a mandate for a hard Brexit? Lucy, you worked with the Stronger in Europe campaign. There you are. People voted to leave. They voted to get out. They voted for Brexit. Deal with it.
Well, as you say, they did vote to leave, but the question on the ballot paper was, do you want to remain or leave, not where do you want to go afterwards? And so I think there isn't really a mandate for any kind of Brexit because the terms weren't part of the referendum campaign. If you asked a lot of different Leave campaigners, they set out a lot of different visions. Some said, let's stay in the single market. Some said, let's leave. And I think actually if you asked a lot of people who voted to leave, were you clear that leaving meant leaving the single market, leaving the customs union and the potential tariffs, the potential issues with our trade with Europe that would come with that? Would people really be clear that that's what they voted for? I don't think they would be.
Matt, do you want another referendum?
I think whether I want one or not is immaterial. I think it would be very wise if we decided that in 18 months' time Britain was hurtling off a cliff edge. It would be a nice idea to have the option to apply the brakes. And I can't get this argument about anti-democracy that is currently pervading the nation and this message about enemies within and the front page of the Daily Mail and the hard right ideologues of the Tory party saying that all debate is now over. Democracy was a point of singularity on June the 23rd, never to be revisited. And we know that that democratic vote, which I accept, there are many good reasons for people voting as they did, but we know that a lot of people voted on the basis of lies, misinformation, duplicity, and I think once we know what the reality is and what we know the consequences of this to be, it would be entirely sensible and democratic for people to have an option for another say, whether by a referendum or on a general election.
What about this business of people voting on the basis of lies? Do you think that's a little bit patronising?
I think it's incredibly patronising. I think, first of all, you've got to recognise that whenever people talk about the lies of Boris Johnson, the lies of Vote Leave, what they're really talking about is what they perceive to be the gullibility of the public. They're effectively thinking that the public were duped into doing this and therefore that they should see a way out of it. And I think that's the underlining message. This idea that Matt believes in democracy so much he wants to ask us again in the hopes that he'll get the right answer next time, I think is completely anti-democratic. And I think if we're talking about the key question of of is there a mandate for hard Brexit? The Brexit vote is the biggest democratic mandate in British political history. People voted for this with their eyes wide open in a referendum which the leaders of both campaigns...
52-48.
52-48, that's how majoritarian democracies work.
Do you think if the question had been, do you want to leave the single market, what would the answer have been?
I think that was entirely clear all the way throughout this campaign for two main reasons. One of which was the leaders of both sides of the campaign constantly told us that this would mean leaving the single market. Second of all,
Boris Johnson didn't.
The central point of the Leave vote, you see this in the Ashcroft polls which came out after the referendum result, was the principle that laws that govern this country should be made in this country. Self-determination. You cannot have that within the single market.
This is absolute... I'll tell you where the condescension and the patronising element of all of this is coming from. It's coming from the people who are now telling British people, shut up and put up. We've had a vote, it's over, move on. You guys didn't shut up and put up after 1975 when you lost the first referendum. This is the second referendum, right? This is not the first referendum. People have a right to debate, they have a right to dissent, and it is so condescending of Theresa May to pretend that there is such a thing of the will of the British people. There is not.
How many referendums do you want before you get the right answer?
No, look, generally speaking, I'm against referenda. I don't think they're a great idea. I think if you did have a referenda, it should be on a supermajority, something as constitutionally critical as this. But generally speaking, these are hugely complex issues. I don't feel qualified to have a say. I certainly don't feel the confidence that the British public knew exactly what they were getting into. And anyway, we're going to hear about economy and economics. Nobody knows. That's the truth. Nobody knows how this is going to play out. My argument is, when we do know, let's have the chance to say again.
Tom, we might not know how this is going to play out for an awfully long time. Yeah. That's the thing here. Young people voted overwhelmingly to stay, 73% of 18 to 24-year-olds. Now, this is about our children, and this is about our grandchildren as well. Is there a mandate for Mrs May for those who will be alive when the true effects of this hit them?
Well, I think in terms of Brexit, first of all, I think Brexit is a gift to young people, whether they realise it or not, insofar as you have a chance to take part in a real democracy in which you can determine the future of this society and its politics.
They should be dancing in the streets.
They should be dancing in the streets, as far as I'm quite upset that so many people my age have wept so many hot tears over it, but nevertheless, I think when it comes down to the point I want to make, though, in relation to this, though, is people talk about young people, they talk about Scotland, and effectively it's an attempt to try and break up the vote and the electorate. That is not how a majoritarian democracy works. You see it in relation to when people talk about 48% voted Remain, therefore maybe we should join EFTA or the EEA or something. That way it keeps everyone happy. That would be the equivalent of having a general election next week. Say the Conservatives win 70%, Labour wins 30%, and Theresa May says, you know what, Jeremy, we'll run the country 5 days a week and you can have it on the weekends. It's a ridiculous position.
Lucy, come back, and then we'll bring Mark in. Lucy, you're not, I can see from your body language, you're not liking what you're hearing.
No, because I think, Tom, the point about the Leave campaigners were they had so many different positions throughout the campaign. It was not at all clear that we would definitely leave the single market.
Does Mrs May have a mandate for the kind of Brexit that she's going to push through?
No, because there is no mandate for any particular sort of Brexit, precisely because of that lack of clarity. The way the campaign was fought wasn't on specific terms, this is precisely what it'll look like. If you ask the leaders of the Leave campaigns, all they had to do, and they say this, is get people over the line. They had to get people to vote to leave. As for the rest of it, that's up to the politicians. And that's what's so disappointing for people like me who were on the Remain campaign. And for me, I passionately cared about what happens to the future of this country, what does the deal look like, how do we make sure that trade is as free and as frictionless as it was before. And nobody had a clear answer during the campaign, and nobody has a clear answer now. And so there is no mandate because there wasn't that clarity.
OK, we're going to come to the audience in just a second. Those people, oh, those hands. Right, that's what we like to see. Those people who allegedly did not know anything about what they were voting for. People who did not understand it. We've been hearing this. We'll just investigate some of that in a moment. It's a clear moral position here. It's a clear ethical debate, though, about having a mandate or not. And a lot of people, Mark Littlewood, Ipsos Mori poll say that 33% voted to leave because of immigration. David Davis, the Brexit secretary, said this week that immigration may go up. You have a certain criterion, don't you, as to who you would allow into the country with no questions asked? Who would that be? What level of earnings?
I would change our immigration system so that if you had a job offer of, say, £50,000 a year, that's a pretty decent paying job. We would be confident that you would be a net contributor to the tax system. You're definitely in. I don't care which part of the world you come from. In you come.
50,000?
50,000. Then if you have, let's say, a job offer of a lower level, say a roughly average wage of 20 or 25,000, you're in. But you might not qualify for all of the benefits that the indigenous population qualify for. It might be no housing benefit until you've contributed such and such an income tax. It might be that you're only able to access A&E at the National Health Service until you've contributed...
What about the care services, the health services, the service industries, the fruit-picking industry, the agricultural workers, the hotel industry, the catering industry? What about those?
Well, I think that they would fit in my second category. As long as these people are coming in without being a net drain. I'm very liberal on immigration, but I think that I'm in an ideal world. I'd have open borders. We don't live in an ideal world, and therefore I think that in order to get the immigration debate back on track, you do have to address what people's concerns are, and the concerns are whether there is a drain on public services. Now, there's an easy way to solve that. That you say, if you're coming in with a ton of money and paying huge amounts to the taxpayer, of course you can have the public services. If you're coming in rather lower than that, less than that, or on a lower job, your qualifications for benefits won't kick in immediately. That's not an immigration policy you can have if you're a member of the European Union. It is one that you can have outside. Yeah.
We know.
You're looking exasperated.
Well, I am exasperated by the ideology that's playing out here.
What sort of ideology is it? Is it hard-right ideology?
I think it feels hard-right to me, and I think it's pervasive. I think it's a message that the right-wing press has been pushing for 10 years, that the Daily Mail has been almost this Pavlovian experiment about migration. Migration's of net benefit to this country. And when I hear these things about the categorisation of 50 grand you're in, 25 grand you're in, but you can't go and see your GP. It just doesn't seem very British to me. It doesn't seem like it's the kind of values I signed up to as a British person. And I think we live in an open society, and I think this is the split in the referendum. We've seen a move away from the traditional spectrum of politics, of left versus right, to different attitudes now of open to Europe, open to globalisation.
Cultural attitudes.
Cultural attitude and sentimental attitudes. And what worries me is that the communities that voted to leave in greatest numbers are the most fragile communities in our nation. Up in the northeast, where they've voted to leave in great numbers, their economy is most fragile. Down in the southeast, in London, it's going to be fine.
So the people that most voted for it are the people that are going to suffer most from it?
They're going to suffer the most.
I've heard that.
They're going to suffer the most.
OK, audience, put your hands up about... Does she have... Sir, does Mrs May have a mandate for a hard Brexit, a real Brexit, whatever you want to call it? It has been called many things. What do you think?
I think it boils down to two basic questions. First of all, is the vote of the majority, if it's a simple majority, enough to enforce such a thing as Brexit and inflict it on a whole country, even though 45% of the voters didn't go for that?
Tom was saying it, and 48% didn't go for it. That's what Tom was saying, majoritarian system, yeah. So
my question would be whether democracy works that way, or should work that way, that it's a tyranny of the majority.
Okay.
And the other thing is, when it comes to if there is a mandate, if there was enough information, and we have to deal with the post-truth era and the misinformation that's been spreading all over the country with regards to the questions of Brexit.
All that money for the health service is one of the things that we hear about all the time. Anyone else want to just say anything here about it? Yes, sir. Yeah, Blue jacket. Quick point.
Yes, it's about, the gentleman talks about, the point system there, which already exists for international. So there is tier 1, there is tier 2, there is tier 3, there is 4, there is 5. So that just can actually be adjusted and modified to European as well. So for investors, for workers, for lower skills, medium skills, higher skills, we'll be accepted.
Does Mrs May have a mandate for this?
I think so. I think so myself.
OK, anyone else in the middle of that? Yeah, lady there, pink jacket. And right in front of you in just a second. Hello.
Hello. I believe that Mrs May does have a mandate for it, because majority of us who were voting for leave voted on the basis of two things. One was that there would be controlled migration. Second was that we would trade with the whole world. And trading with the whole world means just that. It doesn't mean trading with European Union exclusively. We can make a deal with European Union. They need us as much as we need them. But why can't we have a deal with Australia, with Canada, other countries which we used to have a deal with? And if I can just add one thing, as you can see from my accent, I'm a European. I was born in the Czech Republic, and I believe that the idea of great Europe is wonderful, but it's not enforceable because people are doing things for their own benefit, for their own mandate. And I feel that a lot of people here who are saying we should have left European Union, those people don't have enough faith in their own British country.
Okay, well, what about, do we have faith in, let me put this to you, Tom, do we have faith, Tom, in the people who are leading the negotiations here? We saw the Article 50. Some people are saying they forgot to mention Gibraltar. They forgot to mention the other land border. Oh dear, whoops. And also, some people are saying, well, you know, we need the very best calibre of negotiator. Do you have, how much faith do you have in David Davis and Liam Fox and Boris Johnson? This is a government that had to change its budget after 3 days. Do you think we've got the best people there?
Well, I think we should remain sceptical, shall we say. I mean, one of the big paradoxes... I think we need... the main thing
the most important negotiation, the most important period our country has faced for decades.
Exactly, and we should hold politicians' feet to the fire in terms of making sure that they've got the right people in the room to be able to conduct that negotiation, as well as to make sure they follow through on it. The point I would make is that what's really striking about the Brexit vote is that you have this huge kind of radical, progressive blow for democracy, which was completely against what the leaders of the political class actually wanted. We're in a situation where the two most powerful politicians in this country campaign for Remain and are probably quite shocked that they've got to deal with this. That's something that we need to kind of tease out in the long run. We basically voted against technocracy, and it's now left to technocrats to deal with. That's something that we need to watch. But the thing that I am encouraged by, and I think the thing that we saw as the Article 50 bill was passing through both the House of Commons and the unelected House of Lords, was the fact that despite the fact the vast majority of these people backing Remain, they all rolled over in the face of the democratic mandate. The weight of that was really bearing on their backs. That's a positive thing. We need to hold our political class to make sure this negotiation is conducted properly, but also at the same time that they uphold what the 17.4 million people voted for. I think we can do that.
I think there's a very interesting development in progress that we're seeing now, this mantra, this almost hypnotic mantra of take back control. The truth is, we've never had less control. We saw this week all the party poppers going off from the Leave campaign. They've won victory, Independence Day, all of that. And then Donald Tusk said, I'm sorry, it's not going to work like that. And you're now 1 against 27. When we were arguing with Spain about Gibraltar in the past, it was us versus Spain. In the future, it'll be us versus 27 European Union member states. Much, much weaker. Margaret Thatcher knew it was better to be at the table arguing our case than to be outside and not. And this talk about trade deals...
You can't wave your handbag from an empty chair.
There isn't even an empty chair. There's nothing. And the idea of trade deals in India and Canada and Australia and America, there's a very basic rule about trade: double the distance, half the trade. We're talking about possibly WTO tariffs with our neighbours 20 miles across the channel in exchange for a spurious idea of free trade with America.
You want another referendum on this? You want to see the deal, you want to see what's on the table, and you want another referendum?
If I buy a house, if I put an offer in on a house, and it turns out that house is sitting on a sinkhole, I want an opportunity to say, I'm sorry, I'm going to tear that contract up.
You know what we need? We need a psychotherapist. The whole nation. The whole nation needs a psychotherapist. Never mind a group hug. We've got one. We've got a psychotherapist. Do you think people were stupid? Do you think people were bamboozled and misled?
I think people were misled. It's not what I think. I think the evidence is very clear that they were misled. It's a well-known phenomenon, mob rule. People follow the mobs. When the Brixton riots happened, that was a popular uprising. It doesn't mean that what people did and said then was right. When Liverpool 8 was destroyed, a mob uprising, it doesn't mean that was right. And I think that
It's
what's
mob
happened...
uprising.
It's hardly a mob uprising.
I think that what's happened...
People cast a ballot. This is not the equivalent of a mob.
They were asked...
This is what democracy is.
They were actually asked in a ballot whether we should leave or remain in the European Union. The people who campaigned to leave weren't the people who are going to deliver Brexit.
Yeah,
they were a
pretty clear,
completely independent group. I'm interested in the idea that some people may be eligible to come to Britain earning less than 50,000 on certain conditions. They won't have access to A&E, for instance.
That's his idea.
But I tell you what, they can work in A&E and deliver A&E, they can nurse, they can doctor, but they can't practice it. I think that's ludicrous.
The thing is, Tom, look, you know, you're a guy in your 20s, yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah. So a lot of the people, the disproportionate amount of people over the age of 65 who voted for Brexit, they're not the people who will be around, with every respect, to see the long-term consequences for our country.
I dare say it's just a very convenient argument to try and undermine the vote itself, to try and say this has such consequences. This involves all of us, and everyone should vote it on an equal basis. That's the great thing about democracy, take it or leave it. And I think what's fascinating is you've seen over the last couple of months how that anti-democratic current, which I always believed was there but never really saw up close, you hear phrases like mob rule, you hear phrases like the tyranny of the majority, and it's just absolutely incredible. I mean, fundamentally...
But look at the derision poured upon anybody who questions it in some of the papers. You know, any of the 48%, they say anything, and they're called enemies of the people.
If we're going to talk about derision, I want to talk about Leave voters in relation to this. Ever since the Brexit vote, we've been called racist, we've been called stupid, we've been called xenophobic, we're told we didn't know what we were voting for, when various schemes, legal, the House of Lords, you name it, were cooked up to try and stop this from happening, and we got angry, we were referred to as the mob. If anyone's been derided, if anyone's been undermined, if anyone's told that they're reckless and stupid and shouldn't have a view, it's the people who voted Brexit in the first place, and I think we need to get that straight.
Thank you very much.
I've been